Have you ever wondered what happens when a wedding goes completely wrong? Imagine this, a bride standing at the altar, but she's not the one who was supposed to be there. The dress she's wearing? It was fitted for another woman. The vows she's holding in her trembling hands? She's never even practiced them. And the man waiting for her at the end of the aisle, the man she's about to marry? He doesn't even know her favorite color. Think about that for a second. No love, no whispered promises. Just a heavy, awkward silence stretching between two complete strangers, bound together not by affection but by sheer desperation. To everyone watching, all the guests in their finest clothes, this marriage is a disaster waiting to happen. A monumental mistake. They whisper behind their hands, shaking their heads, convinced it's doomed from the start. A union of convenience, a business deal sealed with a ring. But here's the secret, the one thing nobody in that room knows. This last-minute bride, this replacement, is the one person who will completely change everything. She's the woman who will finally break through the groom's carefully constructed walls. She will shatter the cold exterior he shows the world and teach him the true meaning of love and its staggering cost. So who is this mystery bride? Her name is Clara, and just hours ago, her life was completely different. She was a struggling artist, pouring her heart onto canvases that barely paid her rent. Her world was small, filled with the smell of paint and the quiet hum of her tiny apartment. Marriage wasn't even on her radar, let alone a lavish wedding to a powerful, intimidating stranger. But then, a crisis hit her family. A debt they couldn't possibly pay, a threat that loomed over their heads like a dark cloud. Desperation led her to make a choice she never thought she'd have to make. She agreed to take her sister's place. And the groom? He's Alexander, a man who has built an empire from nothing. He's known for his ruthless business tactics and his guarded heart. To him, marriage was just another contract, a strategic alliance to secure his company's future. The original bride was part of that plan, a detail in a much larger picture. When she vanished at the last minute, he needed a replacement, and fast. He didn't care who it was as long as the deal went through. He saw Clara as just a stand-in, a temporary fix to a business problem. He was cold, distant, and made it perfectly clear that this was not a marriage of the heart. Their first conversation wasn't about their hopes or dreams. It was about the terms of their arrangement. Their wedding night was as cold as you'd imagine. Two strangers in a massive empty mansion, the silence between them louder than any words could be. They slept in separate rooms, living like ghosts in a shared space. The first few weeks were a painful dance of avoidance. They'd pass each other in the long hallways with a stiff nod, sharing meals in a dining room that felt more like a boardroom. Alexander was always working, his phone constantly ringing, his mind on mergers and profits. Clara felt like an intruder in her own home, a decorative piece he'd acquired but had no use for. The staff treated her with polite indifference, seeing her as the temporary bride. She was utterly alone, trapped in a gilded cage. But Clara wasn't one to simply fade into the background. She started to explore the huge, lonely house. One day, she stumbled upon a locked room. Curiosity got the better of her, and she managed to find a key. Inside, she found something she never expected. The room was a forgotten art studio, filled with dusty canvases and dried-up paints. In a corner, she found a portfolio of stunning, emotional sketches. They were raw, passionate, and full of a longing that resonated deep within her. She realized with a jolt that these weren't just any drawings. They were Alexander's. The cold, calculating businessman had the soul of an artist. This discovery changed everything. It was the first crack in his armor. Clara cleaned the studio, bought new supplies, and started painting again. She left one of her own canvases out, a vibrant landscape full of life and color, right where he would see it. The next morning, she found a single charcoal pencil left next to her easel. It wasn't a conversation, but it was a start, a silent acknowledgement. Slowly, tentatively, they started talking. Not about business, but about art. About color and light and the way a single brushstroke can convey a world of emotion. Clara began to see the man behind the mask. She learned about the immense pressure he was under, the betrayals he'd faced that had forced him to lock his heart away. He had given up his passion for art to save his family's legacy, a sacrifice that had slowly chipped away at his spirit. In turn, Alexander started to see Clara not as a replacement, but as a person. He was captivated by her spirit, her resilience, and the way she saw the world with such vibrant optimism. He'd watch her paint, mesmerized by the way she brought joy and color into his gray, sterile world. One evening, he found her in the garden, and for the first time he asked a personal question. He asked about her dreams. She told him about her dream of having her own gallery, of sharing her art with the world. He listened, really listened, and in his eyes, she saw a flicker of something she hadn't seen before, admiration. He started doing small things. He'd have her favorite tea brought to the studio. He'd leave a rare flower on her pillow. These small gestures were his new language, a way of speaking from the heart he had kept silent for so long. Their connection grew in the quiet moments. They started sharing late-night talks in the art studio, surrounded by their shared passion. He opened up about his past, the pain and loss that had shaped him. She listened without judgment, offering a comfort and understanding he had never known. He found himself smiling more, laughing even. The cold mansion began to feel like a home. The staff noticed the change, the way the air in the house seemed lighter, the way Mr. Alexander's sharp edges had softened. He was falling in love with his replacement bride, and the realization both thrilled and terrified him. But just as their fragile love story began to bloom, the past came crashing back in. Clara's sister, the original bride, suddenly reappeared. She was in trouble, and she came with demands, threatening to expose the entire arrangement and create a scandal that would ruin Alexander's company and both their families. She was jealous of the bond Clara and Alexander had formed, a bond she had thrown away. Alexander was faced with an impossible choice: give in to the blackmail to protect his empire, or fight for the woman he had unexpectedly come to love, risking everything he had worked his entire life to build. Everyone expected him to make the logical choice, the business choice, to cut his losses and get rid of the problem, which meant getting rid of Clara. The old Alexander would have done it in a heartbeat. But he wasn't the old Alexander anymore. Clara had changed him. He finally understood what was truly at stake, and it wasn't his company, it was his heart. In a move that shocked everyone, he called a press conference. He stood before the world with Clara by his side, and he didn't just confess to the arrangement. He confessed his love for her. He told them how their marriage started as a contract, but had become the most real and important thing in his life. He chose her openly and definitively, choosing love over business, choosing his heart over his empire. It was a massive gamble, but it paid off. His honesty and vulnerability won people over. And in that moment, looking at him, Clara knew that this man who once didn't know her favorite color would now spend the rest of his life painting her world with it. Their story didn't start with a promise, but it ended with a love that was more powerful than any vow. It began as a replacement, but it became a love that remade them both, proving that sometimes the most beautiful things in life are the ones we never saw coming. Thank you so much for watching. If you loved this story of unexpected love, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more tales that will capture your heart. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. We'll see you in the next video. The church was already full when she arrived. Not with joy, but with whispers. People leaned toward one another, their curiosity louder than their prayers. They all knew something was wrong. Weddings weren't supposed to feel this tense. They weren't supposed to feel like a funeral dressed in white. Ayla stood at the entrance, her hands trembling inside lace gloves that didn't quite fit. The dress hugged her shoulders awkwardly, as if it knew it belonged to someone else. Because it did. She was not the bride they had been waiting for. Just 24 hours earlier, Ayla had been sitting on the edge of her bed in a small rented room, counting coins and wondering how long she could survive on hope alone. Her phone rang just after midnight, her aunt's name flashing on the screen like a warning. "The wedding is still on," her aunt had said, her voice shaking. But the bride. She ran. The original bride, the woman everyone had prepared for. The woman he loved, she was gone. And the groom, cold, proud, untouchable Elias Hart, refused to cancel. The Hart family name didn't allow public humiliation. Investors were coming, business partners. Friends who believed strength meant never bending. A canceled wedding would look like weakness, so they searched for a solution. And somehow, impossibly, heartbreakingly, they found Ayla, a cousin by distance. A girl with no powerful last name. No one important enough to cause trouble if things went wrong. A girl with debts, a sick mother, and a life that had taught her how to survive disappointment quietly. "It will only be on paper," they told her. "You'll be taken care of," they promised. "He won't love you," they warned almost kindly. Ayla said yes, not because she believed them, but because she had run out of reasons to say no. Now she stood at the altar, the weight of 100 stares pressing into her skin, and finally looked at the man she was about to marry. Elias' heart did not look at her. He stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, eyes dark and distant, as if he were somewhere else entirely. As if this moment had already been buried in his memory, labeled necessary but meaningless. When their eyes finally met, there was no warmth in his. Only pain, and something harder resentment. She understood then. He wasn't angry at her. He was grieving someone else. The vows were spoken like obligations, his voice never shook. Hers almost broke. When he slid the ring onto her finger, his touch was brief, careful, as though she were made of glass or gilt. "You may kiss the bride." The room held its breath. Elias leaned in, paused just long enough for the world to notice, and pressed a light, distant kiss to her cheek, not her lips. The message was clear. This was not love. This was not romance. This was an agreement between two wounded strangers. That night, in the massive house that echoed with emptiness, Ayla stood alone in a guest bedroom, because that's what it was even now, a guest in her own marriage. She removed the dress slowly, folding it with care, even though it wasn't hers to keep. She stared at her reflection and whispered words she didn't know she needed. Just survive. Down the hall, Elias sat in his study, staring at a photo frame turned face down on his desk. The woman who left him. The woman he thought he would marry. The woman who shattered his certainty. He told himself this marriage was temporary. That Ayla was a solution, not a partner, a name on paper, a role to play. He did not yet know the truth. That the quiet woman in the other room, the last-minute replacement bride, was about to become the one presence he would no longer know how to live without. And the slowest, deepest kind of love was already beginning to take root. The morning after the wedding was eerily quiet. The mansion, with its vast hallways and polished floors, seemed to hold its breath. Ayla moved like a shadow through the kitchen, brewing tea for a man who had barely acknowledged her presence beyond obligation. Elias entered silently, his suit crisp, his expression unreadable. He took the cup she handed him with a nod, no smile, no words. But for the first time he noticed how her hands trembled, how her eyes carried a quiet strength that didn't belong to someone so young. He drank slowly, studying the delicate curve of her fingers wrapped around the porcelain. Something inside him, a lock long sealed, clicked, not fully understanding why. He was a man who controlled everything, his business, his wealth, even his emotions, but he had not accounted for her. Days passed, each one an exercise in restraint. Elias kept his distance, convinced that proximity would not make him care. But Ayla had a way of existing in the silence that made him uncomfortable. She moved through the house not with fear, but with a quiet dignity, speaking only when spoken to, yet noticing everything. The books left open on his desk, the way he poured his morning coffee, the absent weight of someone he had lost. One evening, a storm raged outside. Rain battered the windows, and lightning split the sky in jagged bursts. Ayla found herself in the study, organizing papers Elias had ignored for weeks. He entered, drenched, and for a moment, the mask slipped. "I don't need help," he said, his voice tight. But his hand lingered on the edge of a stack of documents, betraying the tension he could not release. "You do," she said softly, surprising herself as much as him. "We all do sometimes." Her words weren't flattery or manipulation, they were truth. He stared at her, really looked at her, for the first time. He saw more than the substitute bride. He saw resilience, courage, a woman who had said yes to life when life had given her nothing to hold on to. A silence fell, thick and heavy. Then slowly he closed the distance. Not with force, but with the careful, measured steps of a man who didn't know what he wanted, only that he could not look away. Days turned into weeks. The mansion no longer felt empty. Conversations began to flow, not forced, not polite, but real. He told her about his past, the grief he carried like armor. She shared her fears, her dreams, the small moments of hardship that shaped her. Each story chipped away at the walls around his heart. One night, standing on the balcony under the silver glow of the moon, Elias turned to her. "I shouldn't care about you," he whispered. "I shouldn't want this," Ayla's breath caught. "But you do," she said simply. He didn't argue. He couldn't. And in that admission, something shifted. Love doesn't always arrive with fireworks or declarations. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, through shared smiles, lingering glances, the safety of someone who sees all your cracks and stays anyway. Months later, the mansion no longer echoed with emptiness. Laughter filled the halls. Dinner was no longer silent. And Elias Hart, once a man who believed love was a luxury he could not afford, realized he had fallen harder, deeper, more completely than he ever expected. Ayla had not been his first choice. She had been a last-minute replacement, a solution to a problem he didn't want to face. But she became his heart, his companion, his reason to believe in the beauty of unexpected second chances. And in the quiet moments, when the world fell away, they would both remember that their love had begun not in perfect timing, but in courage, the courage to show up, the courage to say yes, and the courage to let someone in when all seemed lost. Because sometimes the love we never plan is the love we cannot live without. This story isn't just a fairy tale romance. It's a testament to the fact that our greatest strengths often come from our deepest wounds. It's about finding light in unexpected places and people. If you loved following Elias and Ayla's journey, let me know in the comments. I'm thinking of creating a final emotional conclusion to their story, diving even deeper into how they built a future together from the ashes of their pasts. This ending would be the perfect cinematic, heartwarming finale, showing how their unexpected love blossomed into a bond that healed them both. Imagine seeing the full circle of their story, from that silent kitchen to a home filled with genuine joy and connection. We'd explore how they navigated the complexities of their new life, how Elias finally shed his armor for good, and how Ayla found her voice and power not just as his wife but as his equal. It would be a powerful tribute to second chances and the kind of love that truly transforms us. Would you like to see that? Tell me below, and if enough of you are interested, I'll bring you the final inspiring chapter of their lives. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that touch the heart. Love did not announce itself. It didn't arrive with grand promises or dramatic tear-filled confessions. It came quietly, disguised as something far more ordinary. It felt like habit, like comfort, like a silent, steady presence. Elias Hart, a man who had meticulously constructed his life to avoid emotional entanglement, found himself noticing the smallest things, details he never would have cared about before, things that belonged to Ayla. He noticed the way she always left one small light on in the hallway at night. Her silence was a space of acceptance, not judgment. And all of this, every single detail, terrified him. Because carrying meant opening himself up to risk. It meant vulnerability. And Elias Hart had built his entire world, his entire empire, on the foundation of avoiding that one critical weakness: pain. He'd learned early on that attachments were liabilities. The first time he realized he had fallen too far, that his carefully constructed walls were nothing but dust, was the night she collapsed. He watched the gentle rise and fall of her chest, listening to her breathe, and replayed every moment he had taken her for granted. When she finally woke up, the morning light was filtering into the room. She found him right where he had been all night, slumped in the chair beside her bed, his expensive tie loosened, his eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion and worry. For the first time, she saw him without his armor, his walls stripped bare. "You don't have to stay," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. His response was immediate, instinctual. "I do," he said, his voice rough. And then, softer, almost as if he were afraid of the raw truth in his own words, he added, "I want to." That was it. That was the moment everything shifted, the point of no return. The confession wasn't "I love you," it was "I want to be here." And for Elias that meant so much more. But love is never truly tested in moments of comfort and quiet revelation alone. It's tested in the storms. And a storm was brewing on the horizon. The woman who once held Elias's heart, the woman from his past, returned. She came back armed with apologies, with perfectly timed tears, and with a shared history powerful enough to reopen wounds he thought had long since scarred over. She reminded him of the man he used to be, of the ambitious plans they had made together, of a future that had once felt so certain, so inevitable. His world expected Elias to choose her. It was the logical choice, the one that made sense on paper. Ayla heard the whispers from the staff, saw the knowing glances from his business partners. Long before Elias said a word, she didn't put up a fight. She didn't cry or beg or demand an explanation. She simply began to pack her things, quietly and with a heartbreaking dignity. She believed that true love meant knowing when your chapter was over, when to step aside gracefully. He found her in her room, a half-packed suitcase open on the bed. When he confronted her, demanding to know what she was doing, her answer shattered him. "I was never meant to replace anyone, Elias," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor he could see in her hands. "I was just here to help you survive the moment. The real story was always going to continue." But she loved a version of me that never truly felt anything. His voice broke, the emotion choking him. "You loved me when I had nothing left to offer. You loved me when I was broken." This was not a woman who would be a consolation prize. "Then choose," she said softly, but with unyielding firmness. "Not out of guilt for me. Not out of comfort or habit." That night Elias' heart walked away from his past. He closed the door on the ghost of a love he once thought he needed. And he literally ran toward the woman he now knew he could not live without. She was believing she was about to disappear from his life, a temporary solution finally being discarded. He didn't call out her name. He reached out and took her hand, the same hand that had once worn a borrowed dress and spoken borrowed vows in a marriage of convenience. "This time," he said, looking up at her, his soul bared, "this time I choose you, not because I need a wife, not because it's convenient, but because I am in love with the woman you are." Ayla didn't answer right away. She needed to believe it, to feel it in her bones. She needed to know this wasn't just another role she was being asked to play. They begin with a simple, terrifying act of courage.